So we are going to be talking today about default dashboard gadgets. This is going to be a demo. So, we are going through this list for a couple of reasons. One, this was a user requested topic. So as I mentioned last time, this is a community group. So if there's anything specific that you would like to explore more of in a particular area, feel free to, message me, reach out to me, and, we'll find a way to work it in. Second reason for having this conversation is because if we don't take advantage of someone that's dedicating the time to show us this stuff in Jira, then we're probably never going to discover it. And I'm not calling anyone out except for myself, because, when I was even going through this list, I was like, oh, I did not realize that was a thing. So hopefully by the end of this discussion, you will all have a similar takeaway. If not, that's okay. I'm glad you're here. Before I jump in, there's like 30 different gadgets to go over, and I don't want to keep you here all night, so I will do my best to be succinct, which is difficult for me to do. But if we don't get through all of them tonight, we don't. But it would be more important for us to get through like 10 of them that you really understand and walk away with that, as opposed to getting a bunch of information that it's like, oh, this is so overwhelming, I'm not even going to bother to try and understand. So with that super long introduction that has eaten up into my allotted time tonight, we can go ahead and begin. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me at any time, because this is not some high-level presentation. All right. So what I'm going to do for each dashboard gadget here is, I'll obviously walk through the gadget, what it does, what things you can configure. I'll also make some suggested recommendations for what type of dashboard that gadget would be useful for. And so the different types of gadgets that I'm defining, and, mark my words, this is not Atlassian canon. So this is just my take on it. We've got personal dashboards that you would create for yourself, team dashboards that you would share with other people within your project or company team, managerial level dashboards. So if you're overseeing other people, you could configure information that is more useful to that context. And then we have the default system dashboard, which is just there as a default that you can override with other dashboards as well. So you're going to see these terms sprinkled throughout these gadgets. Just wanted to give you a definition of what those were. So, all right, let's jump right in. So the first gadget we're going to talk about today is the activity stream gadget. The activity stream gadget will display a summary of your recent activity. So it is a long list of, think of it as like an audit log of whatever you've touched. That'll all just get recorded, and you'll be able to see that in this stream. You can configure it so that instead of showing everything that you have touched or interacted with, you can whittle that down to data that is more useful for you. So a good example of what that would look like is listed right here. So here is an activity stream gadget. If I were to, let me edit this so I can show you the configuration. You have the ability to configure filters. And when I say filters, this is different from the filters that we looked at last time. This is one of those legacy dashboard gadgets. So you've got a little bit of, blast from the past UI here, but you would just configure your different fields and values, and you can add multiple clauses on top of them. And when you hit save, then it will limit the activity stream down to whatever you filter down to. So this is something that's useful for a personal dashboard if you wanted to keep track of whatever you're working on. This is also a good system dashboard if you just wanted to configure something that was, globally applicable. And that would be the extent of this gadget as far as its usefulness. The assigned to me gadget, pretty straightforward. Anything that is assigned to you across any projects that you have access to will appear in this gadget. And you do have the ability, hey, Erica, we just started, so you didn't miss much. You do have the ability to configure fields as well as the field order. So here's an example of the assigned to me gadget. If I were to hit the configurations, you can configure the number of results. You can configure the different columns that you want to have displayed. And you can, of course, reorder them by dragging and dropping. You can choose to automatically refresh this. So if you have your dashboard set up and it's projected to a wallboard, that would be a good instance for checking that box over there. So and this will pretty much give you the information that you're looking for. So that is the Assign to Me gadget. I will say the Assign to Me gadget is one of the more popular Jira gadgets that are available. Very useful for personal dashboards if you want to see, your work. They're also good for team dashboards because the way the dashboard is configured is that it runs off of that current user function in JQL. So if you plug it into a team dashboard, then every team member that pulls up that team dashboard will see information in that gadget that is relevant for them. All right. The average age gadget will display a bar chart of the average number of days that issues have been unresolved. So if you want to track the length of time on average that your issues are just hanging out and not necessarily getting resolved, this would be a good gadget to incorporate into your dashboards so that if the average time is growing, then you've got a problem, and that may be worth a second look or some deeper analysis right here.
And where does it take it from? I'm thinking we have backlogs, and then we have our active development type stuff.
Yeah.
You can specify where you're included in that at the time.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So if we take a look at the configurations for this gadget, you can configure this to either show you data from a project or from a filter. So if you are working across multiple projects and you want to see that data aggregated in this gadget, I'd recommend going the filter route. If you're only ever working within one project, then you can specify the project right there. You can do either or and put it in here. You can specify the period. So if you want the x-axis to show daily or weekly or monthly, you have the ability to configure that. You can also configure the length of time that it looks back in order to determine what that average age is. And of course, you can set the refresh interval. And so if I take a look at this, this is what this looks like for the IT support team within this instance. And then, you can see the average age of unresolved issues keeps growing and growing. So, it's possible there's some old work that isn't getting done that's hanging around. So, do something about it is what this graph is indirectly telling you to do. As far as usefulness is concerned, very good for your team dashboards so that your team can work together to, figure out, hey, what's going on? Why isn't work getting resolved at a reasonable pace? Also good for manager dashboards that want to kind of oversee areas that they are in charge of as well. Average time and status is kind of along similar lines, except the metric that it looks at is that it will show you the average number of days issues have spent in a particular status. So lots of configuration options right here. If I scroll down here and take a look at the configurations, you have the ability to specify either a project or a save filter. So that's a similarity with the previous gadget. You can select the statuses that you want to monitor. So if you have workflow statuses like done or completed or closed, may not be necessary to include those in this gadget because once they reach that level, then who cares about them, right? You can specify the period. You can specify the unit of time that is rendered on the graph, and you have the ability to say how far back you want to go into the past to aggregate that data. So if I refresh this and take a look, I can see that at least for this waiting for support status, come here mid-January and towards the end, I can see that the average time in the waiting for support status increased and kind of just hung out here, at least at the 10 to 15 hour level. So if there was data for any of these other statuses in here, then that would render on the graph. But again, a good way to see like which statuses are your tickets spending the most time in. And, that may give you some insight into some potential impediments or blockers. Very useful for personal or team dashboards. I didn't include manager dashboards in here, but again, that's just my recommendation. You could certainly include it at a manager level dashboard right there. Average number of times in status gadget will display the average number of times issues have been in a particular status. So if we take a look at that, again, it's rendered very similarly to the previous gadget we looked at, except now instead of looking at the length of time within a particular status, it's looking at the number of times it goes into that status. So if we take a look at the configurations, pretty much the same as the previous gadget. So you can pick and choose what information you want to have rendered on here. And then if I take a look at this, metric right here, I can see that for the waiting on customer status, pretty much all the tickets that entered the waiting for customer status, probably it only went in there one time. But if you think about it, if you're on a support team, you may have some statuses that things go back and forth in between, such as, waiting for customer, waiting for support. If you're on a development team, some statuses that you could see repeats for issues would be, in progress, opened or reopened, code review, QA, so on and so forth. So this is just a way to see like, hey, why do we see a large number of tickets repeatedly hitting the QA status, for example? So that's what that gadget will show you. Useful for team and manager dashboards if you want to monitor things at a higher level. The bubble chart gadget. So this one's a unique gadget. This will visually identify any popular and significant issues by displaying data in 4 dimensions. So if you want to put together a cool looking dashboard, you can never go wrong with bubbles, right? You can also never go wrong with a bubble gadget that has enough data feeding it to make it look cooler than what I've got rendered here, right? So if we take a look at what the configurations are, again, and you'll see this become a recurring theme across these gadgets, you can pick and choose either a project or a saved filter. You can choose the bubble size, and you can choose whether or not that is based on the number of participants or the number of votes. I was doing some investigation here. I think the moving pieces to determine who is a participant on an issue would be your reporter, your assignee, the number of people that have commented on the issue, and I think the number of watchers. If there is somebody on the call that knows that that is incorrect, feel free to correct me, but that's my understanding based on my research. So you can specify the interval to determine which which an issue comment is deemed recent. So if I have this set for a week, then any comment added within the past week would be considered recent. If you have a slower moving project, then you may want to extend that interval time frame. Relative coloring. When enabled or selected, issues are grouped or distributed in different colors to better distinguish the issues that receive more recent comments from the ones that receive fewer recent comments. So when you look at the bubble chart, if within the past week you had 5 or 6 different people add a bunch of comments to the ticket, that would be considered more active. Hence, the bubble would get a little bit bigger. Logarithmic scale will distribute bubbles closer or farther apart from each other. And this would also filter out any issues that have been open for 0 days or have no recent comments. So you wouldn't see brand new stuff. So I can see here for this particular ticket within the mobile development project, if I click on it, I can see, these metrics here, 545 days open, 2 participants and 0 recent comments, AKA, no comments have been added within the past week. If I go further back here, the difference here at this point is that they've been open for far fewer days. When I was testing this, I had a really sick looking bubble chart, and then I lost the gadget because I didn't save my dashboard or something happened. So if I am able to put together a really cool bubble chart, I will probably make it the thumbnail for a future ACE event. So But that is the bubble chart for you. And I would say that would be something that would be useful for manager dashboards. So you can kind of gauge and see, where is the action happening, and then determine, is that the right place for the action to be happening. All right. So the created versus resolved gadget will display a different chart of the issues created of the issues created versus resolved over a given period. So if I scroll down here, I can see that, for each day, I can see the number of issues that were created and the number of issues that were resolved. Ideally, you don't want the gap between the two to grow over time. That means you're creating more issues than you are able to resolve them, which means your, backlog of work is getting larger, right? Which we do expect in some cases, but, in the long term, probably not a good idea. The created versus resolved chart is more useful for your service-oriented teams. This is a report that is used frequently for, support staff or, teams of that likeness. But again, if we take a look at the configurations here, project or save filter, you're familiar with that by now. Period, days previously, you're familiar with that as well. As far as the collection operation is concerned, you can specify it by count. Or you can specify it as cumulative. So if you just look at the description there, and if you switched between count or cumulative, then for each day in that graph, you would see the numbers go up from like 1 to 3 to 7 to 25. Whereas if you did the count option here, then each day it would just look at the metrics for that day. So if I only created 3 issues for this one particular day and time, then the count option here would show 3 for that one particular day entry. Display the trend of unresolved will show you the number of unresolved issues over time in a subplot. So I'll just show you what that looks like. And then you do have the option, if your project does use versions, you have the ability to display those versions on your dashboard gadget. And so this is what that would look like. There are no versions in this project, so you're not seeing it, but you can see the subplot of the number of unresolved issues and how they have grown over time or decreased over time. So, and then of course you have an aggregate summary of everything in the graph down here at the bottom. Useful for team and manager level dashboards, just to make sure that you're keeping pace with the volume of work or not getting too far behind. Days remaining in sprint gadget, probably one of the simplest gadgets that you'll encounter for a Jira dashboard. It literally will show you the number of days remaining in a sprint. So if I scroll down a little bit, hooray, I'm at the end of a sprint, so I can take a breath until the next sprint starts in a few hours, right? But from a configuration perspective, you would just configure the board because sprints in Jira are tied to boards in Jira software. So you'd select your board here. You can choose which sprint to show. You can either, pick from a list of active sprints, or you can choose to always show the next sprint that is scheduled. So that way you don't have to come in and keep changing this gadget as you begin each new sprint. And that is going to show you the number of days remaining. So that would be useful for personal or team dashboards, just so you have that little, nudge in the corner saying, hey, we have less time to get more work done if you are not getting that information in stand-ups. Yes.
Question, how does it count? Does it start from 0 or does it start from 1?
You mean like
if today was the start of the sprint, would it say it's like?
That's a good question. I think it would start at 0, but I don't know.
And it's calling it days remaining 0. So
right.
I guess I just wanted to make sure I understood how it's counting. So
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. Does anyone else here on the call or in person know the answer to that question?
What was the question?
When you're looking at the days remaining, like when it starts counting, does it start?
Is it counting today?
Yeah, is it counting the day that the sprint starts or not? My guess is it will probably wait 24 hours before it decrements.
Yeah.
Start of the.
I guess And then when you set the sprint start, is it just dates or is there a timestamp? I can't remember.
I
'Cause
think
if it's
you have
just
the
a date,
ability
I
to
think
set a
it won't.
timestamp.
Yeah, I wonder then if you had the timestamp, it probably just does whole and it probably just rounds up.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. Sorry.
It's okay. Well, that is a good takeaway question. I will try to remember to do some research on that. If I do find the answer, I'll let you know. If someone else finds the answer, please feel free to let me know. And, otherwise we can just take a vote and, reach a decision by consensus, right? Because the Atlassian police didn't show up tonight, so that's good. I do have an asterisk on here. So this gadget is only available for Jira software. If you're in a company or organization that only has Jira Service Management or does not have Jira software, then, this gadget would either not be available. And if it was, it wouldn't be very useful for you because you don't have the sprint functionality. All right, so the filter results gadget. This is a very common dashboard gadget that is used frequently. So if you remember the assigned to me gadget that we looked at earlier, this is basically that gadget, but it's not limited the results to just the work that is assigned to you. So similar to the assigned to me gadget, you can pick and choose the number of results you want to display as well as the number of columns you want to have displayed. You also have the ability to basically specify a saved filter here. So going back to our previous conversation, right? Instead of creating your filters and then having to hit that filters drop down and clicking on your filter, you can just throw the results of that filter in here into a dashboard gadget, and then you can always reference it that way. So you've got multiple ways to consume the results of a filter in Jira. Pick which way is best for you. But again, this is a very popular one. I know some dashboards that pretty much consist of just this gadget because it's a very useful gadget. So it's very useful for personal, team, and manager level dashboards because you can pick and choose the type of data you want to display for those various types.
I tested it. It's -1. So if you started it today and it was 2 weeks, it would give you 9 days. Well, it gave me business days.
Okay. So we had someone here do the research, and you said that can you say that again?
You started it today with 2 weeks in the sprint. It bases it off. Well, mine's basing it off of working days. So instead of being 10, it's at 9.
Okay, gotcha. So there is your answer for those of you that were wondering. So
This is very important information.
no, it is. I mean, it is because people will be like, I've got an extra day, and then, oh shoot, no, the sprint ends, tomorrow.
It says I have a day, but that day is today.
Right. Yeah. That means you don't get to wait till tomorrow to crash and burn and get all your work across the finish line, right? That's really what it means.
Exactly.
It's that 24-hour lock.
That's right. The introduction gadget will display a configurable introduction message on the dashboard. So this is very commonly used to welcome people to your Jira site. And as a result, this is best used on the system dashboard for new users that just get access to your Jira site. They would have access to the system dashboard by default if you set it up that way. And then you can add a personalized welcome message. One thing to know about this gadget, is that this text is configurable in the admin section. So you would need to be an administrator to configure this text. So limited use case, but again, it gives you the option to, kind of steer or direct new users in certain directions if that needs to occur. The issue calendar gadget will show issues and versions in a calendar format based on their due date. Calendars can be based on an issue filter or on a project. So if you're scheduling your issues, and in Jira, when you schedule your issues, you're setting the due date on them, you have the ability to see those issues appear in a calendar view. So here's an example of a calendar for the marketing content project. I can see that for the month of June, there is one issue that is due on June 6th, another one that is due on the 21st and another one that is due on the 27th. If you have release dates for your versions within your project, those would also render in here. And if we take a look at the configurations, again, you can pick and choose a project or a saved filter. You can choose which date you want to display. So, obviously I had the due date set, but if you were to create a custom field that was a date type and you wanted to see that date rendered on the calendar, you have the ability to do that. So you could have you could go nuts with a calendar dashboard, right? And you could use different dates to appear on your calendar if that was going to help out your use case. You can pick and choose whether or not you want to display those project versions. You can pick and choose the number of individual issue icons that display in the calendar per day, as well as the refresh interval. And that will give you a nicer view of what you can see from a scheduling standpoint. Useful for personal, team, and manager dashboards, especially if you're trying to limit the surprises for Christmas time and know what's coming up. The issue statistics gadget will display the collection of issues returned from a filter broken down by a field. So this is actually a very interesting one. So in this case, I've got my issue statistics to show me all work within a project or a filter right here. And I have it broken down by assignee. So if you broke it down by assignee, this is basically like a workload report, right? And you can see, out of how many issues that are assigned to them, how many of them are done or on the rate of being done. You can click on some of these counts to be taken to a filter that's pre-configured with that information. If we take a look at the configurations here, you can choose the project or save filter, as I mentioned. You don't have to break your work down by assignee. If you wanted to break your work down by another custom field, you could certainly do that as well. So if you have, like, for example, components, you could break down your work in your project or filter by components or by category or by any other types of fields that are here in this list. You can choose to implement a sort order as well as a direction. If you want to include resolved issues in your issue statistics, you have the ability to do that as well. And this is just a nice way to consume a little bit more information that you would otherwise, have to calculate on your own. So, don't do the export to Excel and figure that information out that way when you can use this. Yes.
Is it always the field, the count, and the percentage?
Yes. Yep.
Sam, what was that question?
Thank you. The question was, will this gadget render by always showing you the field that you break it down by, the count, and the percentage? And the answer is yes. Yeah. So here you can see I switched the breakdown type or the statistic type. I switched it from assignee to components, and you can see that it rendered it that way. So, all right. Useful for personal, team, and manager dashboards. That's a very useful gadget that I would say medium usage is there, but just out of curiosity, has anybody here on the call or in person ever used that gadget before? Okay, well, when I ask that question in 3 months, everyone's hands are going to shoot up, right? Yeah, that's right. Yes, thank you. Whether you've done it or not, that is the correct answer.
I have plans.
All right, awesome. The issues in progress gadget will display all issues that are in progress and assigned to you, the user view in the dashboard. So think of this as like an assigned to me gadget that's showing you just what's in progress. I have no issues in progress because I completed them or I just don't do any work. Definitely the former because one of my bosses are here or two of my bosses are here. So we're going to run with that explanation. But if you want to look at the configuration, very similar to like your filter results or assigned to me gadget, you can specify the number of results and the columns that you want to have displayed. This is basically the filter results gadget, but it includes a pre-filter in that gadget, if you will. So good way if you're working across multiple projects, you're like, I cannot keep everything straight. that would be the gadget to use to hopefully help keep things in check.
So is there one of these, and maybe you've already said it and I was sleeping? If for a project, you have multiple people, was it the previous one that would give you who was assigned to which issue?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Probably not.
Okay.
You're on a project, you have 5 people working on your project. Is there one gadget that'll say person A has 6 of them, person B has 2, person C has 1, nobody else has anything assigned to them?
Okay, so the question is, if you have like if you had, for example, a project that you had what 5 or 6 people on, would you be able to see a breakdown of what work is owned by them, right?
Assigned to them is what I was thinking.
Yeah, assigned to them. I wouldn't use the issues in progress gadget for that. I would probably use the issue statistics gadget for that and break this down by assignee instead of component.
That's why I said maybe it was the one you just.
That's fine. That's
Okay,
fine.
perfect.
Yep. Yeah. So the issues in progress gadget would be useful for the personal or team dashboard. Again, because that breaks it down to the user that's viewing the dashboard. It can be cross-functional across team members, and it would be useful for the team level as well. The labels gadget will display all JIRA issue labels associated with a particular project. So we all know how labels can easily get out of hand in a project if you're not careful or if you don't have any standards or best practices in place. This gadget will hopefully help with some of that. So if we take a look at the configurations, you can pick and choose which project that you want to show the labels from. And you can pick a field that you want to show the labels from. So there is a labels field type in JIRA. So if you created additional custom fields of the labels field type, those would be selectable from here. And then of course, when this gadget renders, you can see like, oh, here are all the labels that are currently used in this case by the marketing content project, organized alphabetically, and they are a little bit interactive. So when you click on them, that will take you to a predefined issue search.
Sam, on
Yes.
that one, is it only by project? So say, for example, I want to just see bug labels that are assigned to bugs.
Yeah, that's a
my
good
project.
question.
So could I use a filter there instead of just the project?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, the answer is no.
Okay.
You're only able to select the project to show labels from, not a custom filter. So
That'd be the same, I was gonna ask the same thing for, within Epic, the answer is still no.
okay, yeah, if you wanted to look at labels by epic, or yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that with this gadget.
Okay.
Yep. Good questions. Useful for personal and team dashboards. If your teams are doing like a one-to-one mapping per JIRA project. The pie chart gadget will display issues from a project or issue filter grouped by a statistic type in a pie chart format. You have a number of different statistic types that you can select from, including the status, priority, or assignee. So if I take a look at this beautiful looking pie here, I can see that this is a pie chart that is broken down by assignee for the platform development project. If I hover over these, I can see that, Elena's, definitely carrying the weight of this project mostly on her shoulders, and Mitch and Jennifer together are taking up the other part. And then of course, here I am barely doing any work. So
You didn't make the chart.
that's, yeah. If you take a look at the configurations here, you have the ability to select a project or a saved filter. As far as statistic types, again, you can pretty much choose any custom field that's out here. So if you wanted to look at your data a little bit differently, you have that option as well. Assignee is a common use case. Status, those standard fields that come out of the box with JIRA are typically what people gravitate towards. But if you need to monitor this information or visualize it differently, you certainly can do it using that gadget as well. Useful for team and manager dashboards. The projects gadget will display information and filters related to a project. So this is just going to give you a generic project list of what is out there. what is interesting about this project is, you know, in Jira, you have the ability to control access to projects. But with this gadget, it doesn't take into account those permissions. So if you are a new user, you'd be able to see projects that are out there that you wouldn't necessarily have access to, but you'd be aware of their existence right here. So you can pick and choose which projects you want to include in the project list, as well as some additional information such as, you know, how much detail do you want to show in the view, how many columns that you want to have displayed, and so on and so forth. And so this is just a nice summary of what's out there. And then you've got a little bit of, you have a little interactivity here. So if you wanted to click on, if you wanted to take a look at like a filter, a predefined filter by project, in this case, if I wanted to look at any outstanding issues within the facilities project or issues that did not have a due date set, I could certainly, you know, go that route. If I wanted to look at the calendar view for this, which looks like that requires an extension, or if I wanted to just look at the issues, I could certainly do that. So that's useful, I would say, for your system dashboards. Again, for that introductory level new user to Jira. I would also say this would be useful for manager dashboards because you can pick and choose which projects you want to take a look at, and then you have those quick filters available for you right out of the gate. All right. The quick links gadget will display useful links to issues that are associated with the current user. There are no configurations for this for this particular gadget. And you can see that, you know, for a lot of these, the projects, the search for issues, the create issue, and the administration, these are basically, you know, links that you have access to from those drop downs in the system navigation in Jira. And then, of course, you know, these filters are dynamic. And I think that they would, I think that these are consistent across different types of users. So again, as far as whether or not it's useful or not, that's going to determine on your use case. Probably one of the least used gadgets that are out there. But again, if you want people to have quick access to something, then it doesn't hurt to have it. So useful for system dashboards, again, for those new users, useful for personal dashboards if you're still trying to, you know, figure out the lay of the land in Jira. Recently created issues gadget will display a bar chart of the rate at which issues are created, as well as how many of those issues are resolved. So kind of along the same lines as that created versus resolved gadget that we were looking at earlier. But it will render this in a bar chart form. If we take a look at the configuration for this, you can pick and choose either a project or a save filter to render, as well as the period, you know, how you want the x-axis to be broken down, as well as how many days you want to look back for the graph. And so you'll get a nice little, you know, stacked bar chart, and then, you know, hovering over these sections will give you a little bit more information. And this graph is interactive. So if you click on any one of those, you know, bars, it'll take you to a pre-filtered search that feeds into that data. Useful for manager dashboards, again, if you just want to monitor overall volume. The resolution time gadget will display a bar chart of the average resolution time in days for resolved issues. So I need to go over to dashboard number 2. There is apparently a limit to how many gadgets you can include in a dashboard. And I found that out the hard way yesterday. So
you can't just put them all on one.
you can't, yeah, I don't know. But
Is it 32?
I don't know actually. I'll have to go back and figure that
I
out.
had it once before too, and I was like, gosh.
Really? Yeah. Okay. That sounds about right because I have like what 30 some gadgets to show here. So yeah. So the resolution time, you've got a bar chart. It'll show you the average resolution time for issues that were open for a given period. If we take a look at the configuration right here, then again, by now you're all pros as far as what most of the configurations for these gadgets are. Your projects are save filter. You can specify the period as well as how far back you want to look at from a day's perspective, and whether or not you want to refresh it automatically or not.
So for this one, it's automatically defaulting to the resolved field, like, is it literally specific to that field that it's looking at?
Yeah, so the question is this graph rendering it based on the resolved or resolution field in Jira? Yes. Yeah. So side note, when you are working your tickets, make sure your workflows are set up to set the resolution when you move them to done, or any one of those done status categories, those green statuses in your workflow. Otherwise, it'll throw off your metrics and give people a bad time. And Jira people just don't give other people a bad time. So intentionally, I should say. The resolution time gadget is useful for team and manager dashboards, again, for the same reasons that I mentioned to you before. The roadmap gadget, so this is a nice stripped down version of what you can do with roadmaps in Jira, especially if you have access to advanced roadmaps in Jira. But what this will do is this will show you versions which are due for release within a specified period of time. It'll give you a summary of the progress made towards completing the issues in those versions. So we take a look. If we take a look at that, I can see that here are versions that are unreleased within a project that I specified for this gadget. I can see the release date for this particular version, and I can see a summary of the issues that are tagged with that version. So I can see the rate of completion for all of these versions. And if we take a look at the configurations, I can pick and choose which projects I want to include in this gadget. So you're not able to specify a filter, but you are able to select multiple projects. You can specify the number of days you want to cover as well as the number of results. And doing so will help you look at this information at a high level. Now, if you go to the releases page within a project, you would be able to see this kind of information. But again, you have to click a few times to get to that screen within your project. So this is just a nice way to see that.
So there's no way to narrow down the versions that you see from the project level?
So if you wanted to see like 3 out of 10 unreleased versions in Jira, are you asking if there was a way to just see those 3?
Well, like we have releases for different software packages.
Okay.
So would you be able to say, okay, I want to just see the releases for this software package?
You wouldn't be able to using this gadget because it would it would show you all the unreleased versions within the project that you select. So
okay.
If you have it broken down, so, a specific software packages, they're the only unreleased versions in your project, then this would work. This gadget would work. But if you wanted to break it down further, then you wouldn't be able to do that with this gadget. So does that answer the question? Okay, awesome. Sweet. For those of you that didn't hear the question was, could you further define the information that appears in this gadget within a project for the versions within a project? And the answer is not with this gadget, as you saw in the configurations. So very useful for manager dashboards if you are monitoring a version and its rate of completion. And so very useful at that level. The service project report will display a custom or knowledge-based report from a service project. So this is one of those Jira product specific gadgets where if you have Jira service management, there are a list of canned reports that come with that product. You'd be able to select from one of those reports and see that report appear here. So these are all examples of support related reports that you'd be able to select from. You could specify the date range, and you can specify which service project to use. So again, that's one of those things where you can go into the service project itself, click on reports, and you'd be able to see this information there. But again, the whole point of a dashboard is so that you don't have to dig in further unless you need to. This is useful for manager dashboards. And so that'll be helpful there. The Sprint Health gadget is, will display a custom or knowledge-based report. Wow, this was me copying and pasting and forgetting to change the text here. So this is wrong. And I apologize for misleading you, but the Sprint Health gadget, if I were to take a guess, will show you the health of a sprint. So if we take a look at that gadget and how it's rendered, you can see some metrics here that would be useful for you if you are a Scrum Master or in a similar role. You can see these metrics right here, which are clickable, and it would take you to either a filter or it would take you to a report. And so if I were to go into the configurations for this, you would select the board, because again, sprints are a Scrum artifact, which are only available in Jira software, and those artifacts are specifically tied to boards. You can pick and choose whether or not you want to show additional information. You can pick a specific sprint or have it automatically render the next sprint that is due based on the dates that you have scheduled, and that will give you this information. Useful for teams and manager dashboards, and as I mentioned, it is available through Jira software. The sprint burn down gadget, I think that is pretty self-explanatory. It will show you a burn down of your sprint. So for those of you that look at the reports within your Scrum boards, this is basically that sprint burn down report, just in a gadget form. So similar to the previous gadget, you can choose the board, you can choose the sprint, as well as the refresh interval, and that will show you the burn down here. It's very useful for team and manager dashboards as well. The time since issues gadget will display a bar chart of the number of issues that something has happened to within a given time period. That is based on a date field that you choose. And so if we take a look at that gadget, here is a gadget for the platform development project that is showing the number of issues that were created over the last 30 days. So I can see there really wasn't much activity end of December, early January. And you can see that as the year kicks off, the number of issues that are created happens to grow. You can pick and choose from a number of different date fields if you want to monitor different metrics outside of created. And as you've seen for other gadgets, you can choose the project, or you can specify a filter. You can specify the period, how far back you want to look at. And then this whole cumulative totals thing, where if you want each bar to basically, count from 0 or to, add up cumulatively from your previous data points. So that is what that gadget would show you. Again, this is just showing me the number of issues that were created over the last 30 days, but you have the ability to specify additional dashboard or additional date field metrics as well. Useful for team and manager dashboards so that you can see, how much work is going on, by a particular date. The time to first response chart will display the number of hours it was taken to respond to issues for a project or a filter. So this is a metric that is typically tracked in your service projects. Time to first response is a SLA or service level agreement that support teams try to abide by to honor the business goals that have been defined. So you can see here that in this particular metric for the IT operations project, this will show me the average number of hours it took before issues were responded to over the last 30 days. So again, you choose a project or a save filter, you can specify the period, how far back you want to look at. So at some point, you're starting to see that there's a lot of overlap in the configuration for these gadgets, right? And, there's definitely some, consistency and redundancy that's emerging that shows you a slightly different metric that would be useful if you're looking for a particular metric to monitor or analyze. The two-dimensional filter statistics gadget will display tabular data based on a filter. So number of configurations right here. So if you remember that issue statistics gadget that we looked at earlier, that was one-dimensional. Two-dimensional basically allows me to choose two different fields to monitor, and it will render that information in a table. So if you remember in the issue statistics, I had it first show you a breakdown by assignee, and I had it show a breakdown by components. This is showing that same exact information in one gadget. So I remember when I was taking an Atlassian certification exam a couple of years ago, there were a couple of questions on this particular gadget. So if that's something you're studying for, just keep in mind that this would be one of those important gadgets. So again, you can see if I just look at the totals column, if I just looked at the totals column or the total row at the bottom, that would be your one dimension that appeared in the other gadget. But again, this gives you a little bit more data that you can find useful for you. Clearly, I'm not a mobile or a web guy. I'm an infrastructure guy. And even then, I'm stretching it there by even claiming that. So, that's okay. If I want to make myself feel better, I'll just say that those two issues were like, 38 or 55 story points. So it totally evens out, right? You can use this gadget for your personal, team, or manager dashboards based on the information that you want to monitor. All right, we're coming on the tail end right here. So the voted issues gadget will show the issues that you have voted for. So this is a hit or miss. Some organizations keep the voting functionality on, others don't. But if you wanted to crowdsource or gauge interest or popularity on certain issues, you'd be able to, I think it's a thumbs up icon you can click on in an issue. And any issues that you voted for, you'd be able to see that right here. And that's pretty much all there is to configure in that gadget. And it's useful for personal dashboards because it will only show issues that you as the logged in user have voted for. The wallboard spacer gadget is used to add a space between other gadgets. I kid you not, this is literally the gadget, and there's nothing you can do with it. So it was because of this one gadget here that I had to have a whole ACE event to talk about wallboard gadgets or wallboard dashboards. So if you remember when we were looking at the wallboard, there were some dashboards where you saw 2 or 3 gadgets in a row on a TV. Well, if you include a spacer, then it would kick off a dashboard and make the other gadgets render a little bit bigger. So you don't have to walk right up to the screen to see it. So that's all that is there for. And you can include, multiple wallboard spacer gadgets so that, as your TV is cycling through your different gadgets, you won't run into a situation where you have 5 gadgets or so appear on your TV. It's either that or get a super really large TV, and then you don't have to use the wallboard spacer gadget, right? The watched issues gadget, very similar to the voted issues gadget, will show you a list of all the issues that you are watching. So if you click on that eye icon and you choose to subscribe to updates for that issue, this will show you all of the issues that you have chosen to watch. So, hey, look, the 2 tickets that I worked on in infrastructure are the 2 tickets I'm watching. So fancy that, right? And then the workload pie chart gadget will display the matching issues for a project or filter as a pie chart. So if you think about that pie chart gadget we looked at earlier, this is like a further specific pie chart gadget that will show you that workload. So in this case, I didn't even make it to the graph on this one. So dang it, Cassie. But you can see the breakdown here. You can see the time spent by assignee. So how this differs from the other pie chart gadget we looked at is you would see that time component come into play. So if you are on a project that asks you to log time, you'd be able to take advantage of this gadget and show that metric. And so, yeah, because this is time specific, your team would have to be in a habit of logging time in order for this to add any value. But you do have the ability, again, to specify the project or the save filter. And you can choose the statistic type for how you want to break down that pie chart, and that will render it for you as so. And then the last gadget is that we're going to talk about today is the heat map gadget. So this will display the matching issues for a project or filter as a heat map. So if I scroll down here, I have chosen to illustrate a heat map based on status. And so you can obviously, like, word clouds, you can see that the larger values are the more frequently used ones, as you would expect from a heat map. But if we look at the configurations, you can choose the project or a save filter. You can choose the statistic type, whether you want to look at status or something else. And each of these are, clickable, and they will take you to a pre-configured JQL search. So useful if you want to, at a glance, interpret some information without having to go deep into it. So we did it. Before I ask for anyone that has any questions or comments, I wanted to be very clear to say that we'd be covering the default dashboard gadgets that come out of the box with Jira. If you install any marketplace applications, you may get additional gadgets that you can take advantage of. So a couple of the big name marketplace applications, if you install like Tempo Timesheets or Tempo Planner, you'll get some additional dashboard gadgets. If your company uses EasyBI, you'd be able to get some additional gadgets there. And so you're not stuck with just what's available out of the box. There are more out there that can extend the native functionality, as I like to say.